never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change.
In the grim darkness of the far future,
there
are only deals. Come on down to the Rogue Trader Emporium for the best prices on the finest goods in the Imperium. We've got weird Christos, Xenos garbage, chunky weapons, forbidden artifacts that make you insane, and the ill-gotten plunder of 10,000 worlds and more. Hello, everyone.
I'll just trade you 10,000 lobotomized serfs and the rights to 20 systems for the deals you have on the last remaining IKEA furniture in the galaxy in the year 40,000. It's a precious Arcanotech relic. It's flat pack, Rob. They don't have that in the future.
They don't have that in the future. Everything in the future is made of big welded plates together and takes up,
rivets,
10,000 cubic feet because
there's arches. There is no simple Scandinavian design in the future. Everything
Absolutely
is
not.
High Gothic. We're talking about Warhammer 40,000 role-playing Rogue Trader. This is by Fantasy Flight Games, which is out of print, basically essentially stripped for parts, saddled with debt by finance, and gone. I think it's still around, but like many of the beloved Fantasy Flight properties, like Star Wars, Armada, X-Wing, are all been sunset in the name of finance capitalism
of beautiful profit,
yes.
which
is the theme of this game.
A Palpatine voice, ironic. This is Dungeon Master of None.
I'm Dungeon Master Matt. It is very funny. I think what has happened absolutely fits with the theme of this game. Bravo, Asmodee.
So this is a role-playing game system. It's all falls under the big aegis of Warhammer 40K roleplay, which was launched in 2008 and ran for about 8 years until it was sunset, destroyed, stripped for parts. However you want to describe what happened to Fantasy Flight Games, and under that aegis are
this was back when there was like maybe a move from GW to bring some of their licenses back and then give them back out. So this was a previous financial intra corpo drama than the latest round.
Oh, right. Sorry. I should have clarified because there are so many finance capital monstrosities related to Games Workshop that it's you have to specify. But yes, they're always being weird with their rights and licenses and
giving them away too much, not giving them away at all. They're with another company, Cubicle 7, which we may have time at the very end to talk about this. But for, as Rob said, for 8 very interesting years, there were a ton of Warhammer 40K role-playing games of various types and a ton of supplements for them.
Yeah. If you've ever been to your, friendly local gaming store, you probably have seen a bunch of these in the bargain bin or, cast off section. But there's, there were 5 major books, right?
Yeah, it started with one called... actually, should we back up very brief introduction? We're 40,000 years...
40K.
in the future, and everything sucks. There's space fascism, space religion, space elves, space orks. It's all like a little silly and over the top. The scale is crazy. There's endless war between, our big dad. We have a big dead dad who is the emperor,
right?
And he has a bunch of sad sons who like to call each other brother. And Brother Rob, these brother space marines fight each other all the time, including demons and orcs and stuff like that. And it sucks to be basically everyone in this setting, right? And it's all kind of hilarious, and it's a great excuse for why everyone is constantly in a silly battle throwing their lives away. It's not like maybe the best setting for a role-playing game, except unless you're like one of the special like people who are like, what if you were a witch hunter or inquisitor? What if you were a space marine? What if you were, but not a regular space marine, a cool space marine? What if you were like a guard captain or a captain of industry?
That's right. Well, that's one of the interesting things about this, and we'll get into this more later, but like Matt knows more about 40K than I do. I've mostly absorbed it by just being a nerd. But I have actually, I haven't played a ton of the miniatures game. I haven't read any of the novels. I've played like one or two of the tactical video games. I think it's interesting. It's not something that's like not something that I'm super knowledgeable about. So like many of you are, and if you are, don't get mad. If we are incorrect about anything specific to 40K, but if you aren't, even if you're not like a 40K super fan, this is actually an interesting setting, and part of like why I wanted to talk about this is because it is designed, like the sort of lore is built to explain why there are huge armies constantly having knockdown, drag out battles where gajillions of people die, to justify the miniature board gaming sales of Games Workshop. So like it doesn't automatically or inherently lend itself to a smaller scale role-playing game, but they've done something really interesting with both, I think especially Dark Heresy and Rogue Trader, but it is a little, to me it feels a little incongruous with the the overall idea of 40K, which is massive in scale and mostly about just doing war.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a throwback to kind of some of the earlier days of 40K before it was a brand, when it was kind of a more punk DIY kind of miniature game. And the original version of Warhammer 40,000 was called Warhammer 40,000 like Rogue Trader. And
that's right.
The game
what one of the guys, wasn't he like working on like Rogue Trader as like a separate space combat tabletop game?
Yeah.
or a related one, and then it all got rolled up into Games Workshop 40K.
And Games Workshop decided that actually the more interesting or profitable part of the game was building, guys in armor or, people to fight each other, or space orcs and stuff like that. So this is kind of like an interesting throwback at the same time and a diversion from 40K. What if you want to role play in the Warhammer 40K universe? And I expected you to bring up one of the reasons you want to talk about this specific Warhammer 40,000 role-playing is because there's a fairly successful computer role-playing game of the same title.
Actually, I completely forgot about that because that was one of the reasons I brought it up. But since we initially put this on the episode list, I have forgotten. I still have not played it.
Okay.
I intend to.
It's pretty good.
I heard good things about it. But
it's by Owlcat, who is known for their Kingmaker, Wrath of the Righteous role-playing games. Incredibly detailed, incredibly buggy, incredibly crunchy role-playing games.
Very crunchy. Sorry, Matt, that's really funny because I completely spaced on that. But yes, that is another reason why I wanted to bring it up. And part of what's relevant about that is the reason why I think they made Rogue Trader the video game is because this is the sort of like the most popular iteration of Warhammer 40K role playing. And which is interesting to me.
I would say it's the best one. I think maybe Dark Heresy sold a little better, but in like retrospect, this is like the easiest one, right? Dark Heresy is all about like hunting chaos cults and demons and the enemy within the empire, and it can be like a little difficult to set up. Rogue Trader, just to give you an idea, a big galaxy picture of the setting, is you're the captain of a ginormous spaceship, and you alone in the Imperium have the freedom to kind of do what you want, and your job is like, I don't know, get even more rich. You're already rich.
Make money.
Play the great game.
And it's kind of neat. It's a little this happens with a lot of things with Games Workshop 40K, I think. But like, they came up with a cool name / idea and then sort of like worked backwards from that, because Rogue Trader, in the context of, the Imperium and Warhammer, I don't know, sounds like something the Emperor would, order destroyed immediately. But it's actually, they're these sort of like free captains of industry and belong to great houses and have, special kind of licenses, letters of mark-ish to trade and kind of do whatever they want, and they're independently powerful and operate on the fringes of space, which is a pretty cool like sort of conceit and idea for a role-playing game, but sort of out of step with the space fascism part of the Imperium, which dominates discussions of the Imperial Guard and like the Space Marines and all that.
Right. Instead of being part of space fascism, you are tongue-in-cheek part of space hyper-capitalism.
That's right.
But it's also like techno-feudal hyper-capitalism. No problem doing all of these at once.
Right.
And if a normal person is like, well, talking to aliens is illegal, right? Touching arcanotech, if I'm not a blessed tech priest, is illegal, and I'll be, shot. Also, like, I live in a giant hive city and never see the sun, so
Right.
so these aren't really concerns for me. But rogue traders have a special dispensation, a writ of trade that they can break all the rules, right? As long as it vaguely, furthers the
Right.
goals of the Imperium to one degree or another, it's fine. You can do whatever you want. You can go hang out with space elves and enslave a demon and trade a couple worlds with the Tau. As long as it eventually gets the Empire a little bit farther in the stars, it's all fine.
Yeah, and your crew in this game, or one of you specifically, is probably a rogue trader. They don't have to be, but you're like a combination of the East India Company and a pirate captain and a smuggler, but also like a noble lord. You have a lot of power to decide like what you want to do and like how you want to pursue it, which is neat. But there's also like a lot of good like hooks and grooves and things to sort of push you in the right direction. So I don't think the decision making about like how you want to be a rogue trader is overwhelming, but you have a lot more liberty than just about anybody else in the Imperium.
Yeah. Should we talk more about the setting, or should we get into like what you're doing in the actual game?
Well, there's so much 40K lore we could talk about that forever.
There's
but let's
40
talk
years of 40K lore, so
let's talk a bit about like the narrower focus of Rogue Trader, which is one of the things that I think makes this work as compared to, like, we'll talk about the Cubicle 7 game at the end, and just why having a bit more focus, I think, is why Rogue Trader is a little bit more successful. But you don't have to be, but this is focused in a specific part of Imperium space, right? The Coronis expanse.
Yes.
And which is, again, the scale is enormous. It's a, enormous chunk of an enormous empire, but there's a little bit looser, a little bit out on the edge, further on the edges. And
it's only like 10,000 stars or something, like, or 40,000 stars, right? It's
just out of 200 trillion in the galaxy itself. Yes.
Yeah, and the scale is also, so it's focused, but the gameplay is set up so that it's you could do whatever you want, right? You have, in a lot of role-playing games, you start as the weakest of the weak, the lowest of the low, right? In Rogue Trader, you already have not just like a spaceship, not like a Firefly like piece of junk. You have like a 3-kilometer long spaceship that, if you want, can probably blow up a planet or whatever you want it to do. It's got a crew of thousands of people who've probably not even ever met you, right? It's a skyscraper in the sky, a big gothic skyscraper. And the suggestions for the player characters is like, your heads of departments in this, right? Maybe you've served the rogue trader dynasty for decades, or you're a new arrival, right? You're a fancy tech priest, one of the, Dune-like scions of the navigator houses, a captain of the guard or the kind of imperial navy, or like a fancy tech priest who is one of the few people who has learned a couple lines of C++.
Yeah, and the scale is notable, right? And you're not some scrub. And I, if I understand it correctly, this is written so that if you want to come from Dark Heresy and then pick up as a rogue trader, sort of like advance your character that way, you can do it. But you're starting midway through your PC's career where you have power and resources. And
well, so it could be, and this is, I think, a lore thing that is tough to grasp. It could be the beginning of your career. It's just the galaxy is so vast and so big, and you were born or through luck, acquired one of these writ of trade. So even if you are a level, a starting character, you are still like one of the 0.1% most powerful people in the galaxy.
So this is you and your crew, and there's a few different career paths that you can take to be a rogue trader. And these are not your, there's no ranger druid here, right? These are genuinely like unique to the setting and a little different, and they all have what are both like, I got everything in fucking 40K is both like over the top and ridiculous. Like, I know why it's like this, but explorator, not explorer, explorator, astropath transcendent, you're trader, you've got a warrior guy, a psychic guy, various casters, but not casters because magic is verboten, but you can do little.
It's okay to do a little as long as you're following some rules, right? Or no one catches you. Now, I think the character creation system in this is one of the selling points. You've got a life path system where you can take your character through how they were born, how they came into their role. I think one of the interesting things is, and I found it's not been a problem when playing these types of games, is essentially you're asking your friends to make a adventuring party where one of them is like in charge. And I think we've talked about this a little bit on the podcast. This has some pitfalls, but it's not like a terrible idea.
No, we talked about this a bunch because we love Firefly, we love Star Trek, we love ships and campaigns that take place on ships, and that often involves having a captain or somebody like a captain. And that means that everybody has to sort of agree that one person is in charge. And if everybody's on board with that, that's okay. If they're not, it can create problems. But like, this is not unique to Rogue Trader. And we've talked a little bit about like how you might solve this, but you got to make sure that everybody is on board because it doesn't make sense to play Rogue Trader and not have a Rogue Trader. So you do have to sort of solve it somehow.
My only experience with this is that if everyone at your table is friends and realizes that being a captain is just like a little extra work and that they're not actually making the decisions for everyone, it's still by like group consent. It will be absolutely fine. The book gives you some, suggestions in case more than one person wants to be a captain or no one wants to be a captain. You could have an NPC quest giver captain, which is really takes the like shine off the game, in my opinion. Or you could have, siblings of the same dynasty or something like that, cousins as co-captains. I think that's a fine solution. But one person needs to be there's one class that one person has to pick, And then, like Rob said, there's a bunch of other kind of ship role positions. And the way play is suggested to be written is your players will figure out something they want to do. You'll build some sort of sandbox of interesting and deadly places for them to go to. They'll find out information about that. They'll travel through the stars. There might be some ship combat. And then they will be the ones to go down to the planet and do a thing and get a thing or negotiate a thing and then come back to their ship and enjoy their like exotic wines and alien, like pipeweed or whatever.
Let's talk a bit more about the character creation origin paths, because I do like this a lot. I think this is really, really neat. I think this is really well done. I think this could be borrowed for a lot of different systems, just, change the specifics or keep some of them. But you've got 6 different decisions to make about your character's origin. So you can, and I think this is clever. You can start at the bottom and work your way to the top, or you can start at the top and work your way to the bottom. But it's your homeworld, birthright, lure of the void, right? What takes you to the stars, your trials and travails, your motivation, and your career. So, right, you can start with your homeworld or your career, and then this is neat. I like this. I think this is clever. Some people might find it too gamey. I don't know. But like, you can only choose, and this will make more sense if you look at the chart, but like the adjacent options on the path below. So if you pick something like Voidborn, you can only pick the 3 beneath that, which are Scapegrace, Scavenger, and Stubjack, and then the 3 beneath that, which gives you lots of options, but sort of like narrows your path through the chart. I sort of like the idea of just like starting somewhere and seeing where it takes me, but you could also sort of like meticulously plan out what you want to make sure you hit all of the correct things. They do have statistical and in-game benefits, but I really like this. There are lots of like origin path, life path systems out there. Cyberpunk Red has a really neat one. We've talked about a bunch of them in other systems, so it's not a unique idea, but I like the way that it's laid out. I think it's like pretty easy to follow, but you could end up, I don't know, with some weird decisions if you're not careful.
Yeah, the real innovation here is allowing you to go in any direction in the life path system and start anywhere, right? Because you can imagine for some of your players, okay, the career is the obvious important thing, right? That gives you the most benefits, but other people, want to start at the origin or the motivation, right? If you can come up, and the fun thing is, with the restricted choices, I see it as a feature in that if you can come up with an answer to, let's say, motivations or lure of the void or birthright, then you can, if you can do at least one of these 6, then the chart will fill out the rest of itself, right? Or you can flow from one to another as you answer these questions about your character.
That is, I think it's a benefit as well. I think, to me, you can start anywhere. You can just have a vague idea of a character, and then this helps you just sort of fill in the rest of the blanks. I think it makes it very easy to build a character from an idea or an impetus. I can see that if you have a very, very specific idea of a character, it might be restricting, but in my experience, I think this would be actually like a really good thing for a lot of players. There's a neat little bit of this, which I love these little like gamey bits. If you and another player end up on the same section of one of these paths, if you both pick Stubjack on the birthright path, or you both pick press ganged on trials and travails, this is called an intersection. And this doesn't really mean anything, but it just is like, great, you both have this bit of your background. What's the sort of like shared connection? I think this is a really, again, gamey, simple, but like great way to add some connection and motivation for players that doesn't require a lot of like upfront coordination, and sort of like lends itself to, dynamic character creation and role playing. I think it's neat.
Yeah, and if you have 4 characters, you're going to get a couple of these already. And one of I think the fun things about this game is, right, you don't need to have intersections between every character because, right, you're all working as part of the same rogue trader dynasty, right? So you all have some sort of like relationship, and it might be, we're colleagues. This character is my boss, etc., etc. So yeah, the intersections are icing on the cake. And I suppose we should talk about the actual dice system that you're building with these characters, which is, the standard kind of building off of what was set by basic role-playing and GURPS and Warhammer Fantasy role-playing. Fantasy Flight Games, 40K, all use the exact same percentile-based system that has both attributes and skills. So each of your attributes will give you a number. You roll under that number, you have a success. Skills add either 10 or 20% to your number depending on their level. You can adjust the number up and down based on the difficulty or ease of the task, right? They can up it and down it, and then everything based off of that gets really fiddly and detailed.
Yeah. Well, this is a standard percentile roll under, and there's a couple things about this I think that are potentially a little confusing. The other sort of clever thing about this to me is that you only need 2d10, right? You've got one for 10s and ones for ones, but then you can also roll your 2d10 for damage or 1d10 for other certain checks. It's a good economical use of dice. You only need 2, but they can serve a lot of different functions. I find the language used around this to be potentially kind of confusing, because if, it says you roll with a plus 10 bonus, I and many people might think that you are adding to your roll instead of adding to the number that you are, trying to roll under. And the same thing with penalties. This is, again, I mentioned this in our dice episode. I have a brain problem with rolling under. I just like it is counterintuitive to me. But
it makes sense. You get a bonus, that means you up the number. Perfect.
It does make sense. I'm want to sort of signal that sometimes the language is imprecise, and I would I think it could be more standardized to make a little bit more sense with when sometimes they're talking about like what you add to what, but the math is good on this. The numbers are good, and it makes a lot of sense. It's very crunchy. It's very fiddly, but it does allow a lot of fine tuning when you're trying to, improve your character or achieve a certain result, or for you as the GM to adjust difficulties.
Here's a good thing and a bad thing, in my opinion, about this system is a good thing that's kind of funny is that a lot of the characteristics like weapon skill, ballistic skill, toughness, strength, fellowship, basically correspond to some of the stats in the Warhammer 40,000 miniatures game. So if you ever wanted to put like a demon engine of Nurgle or something, you would have a rough idea as to what its stats should be. And so that's kind of nice. And then I like how the stats themselves, most of them serve double duty in that if you have a 35 strength, that means 3 is your strength bonus, right? Which might add to certain things like attacks and melee. One of the downsides is, so you've got, 9 attribute scores. And then I think there are like 30, 35 skills. There are so many skills.
Yeah.
Lip reading is a skill. Literacy is a skill. I mean, that one kind of makes sense in this grim, dark future where, most people are illiterate. But, there are so many skills.
Yeah, I mean, this is not uncommon for RPGs of this era, but there's things like contortionist and carouse and intimidate, but also interrogation and evaluate and inquiry, like just in these games with 50 different skills which cover everything, I find that this is often a difficulty as a GM because you are often trying to find opportunities for players to use skills that they have put points into, which are very, very narrow applications, right?
Right. There's wrangling, there's barter, blather, trade.
Yes. There's
both
barter
a
and trade. They're
and
not the same
commerce.
thing.
There's a commerce.
And commerce.
Well, okay.
Right.
I mean, if you look at this, they do have different
I know why
meanings,
they exist.
but there's no reason for this many.
They could all, and this was one of the, this is a criticism, I guess, that I was going to level. But like, yeah, a lot, it's not just about skills. Many parts of this book could be condensed, just a period. Skills, but also attributes, talents, all, there's again, this is from an era of role-playing game writing that I think we've moved on from, but it's just, there's too many things. There do not need to be so many things. You could have a much more elegant system that allows for all the same stuff that, takes up half as many words.
Yeah. The result of all of this, and, as Rob mentioned, talents, but there's also incredibly detailed equipment and stuff like that, is that things like combats will feel very granular, right? Like I got, shot through the leg with a plasma gun, which has this special effect. And then when I go back to the ship, I'll get this cybernetic to replace it. And, all these kind of like fiddly bits that really make your character feel like a, disgusting, weird, rejuvenated rich person of the far future that has a big floating skull with a computer in it that talks to them. All the things that you sort of see in Warhammer art, like they are very felt. The downside is that like everything is super complicated. Ship combat is super complicated. Using skills, because there's so many selections, can be kind of complicated. Combat it doesn't take forever, but it is not the most streamlined system.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun if you want to be able to like, I fire my lasgun full auto and, blast the orc's arm off at the, left shoulder joint, and, these things happen. Like it's fun. Like you get a lot of like really gnarly outcomes, but it is not fast. It is I mean, it is clearly, it's not the same as the miniatures game, but it resembles parts of it in the, precision and crunchiness of it. Should we talk about the ship a little bit before we go on? Because the ship is also a character, Matt.
The ship is also a character. Yeah. Whenever you find a show that says the ship is also a character, it means you found a good one.
Take my love, take my land, take me where I cannot stand. I don't care, I'm still free. You can't take the sky from me. Take me out to the black. Tell them I ain't coming back. Burn the land and boil the sea. You can't take the sky from me.
In my opinion. You have this giant floating warp vessel that you must have a navigator, which have their own special rules that to pilot through the immaterium or warp space. A lot of the ship is like tracking. You have a ship character sheet tracking its crew, and what are you have ship peasants, right? Whereas if you play a game of like Star Wars or Star Trek or Firefly, you have friends and colleagues and employees down there. In Rogue Trader,
serfs, Matt. They're not
serfs.
Peasants. They're worse than peasants. They're
serfs. They're born, they live, and they die like manning, like their airlock or their like air cleaner system or something like that, which they don't even understand how it works. They spend their whole lives loading guns by hand because it's cheaper to have people do it.
Right. There's a lot more people than there are. It's easier to get just the grinding mass of the Imperium to do things.
Yeah. So like there's a huge variety of starships, both ones that your players are likely to have and enemies they come in like a basic hull, which you can, again, if this is a game that's like trying to encourage you to do stupid things to make a stupid amount of money, there's a lot of stupidly expensive things you can add to your ship that will encourage you to do other things. And maybe you'll want to get more than one ship and have a whole fleet of ships.
And this is neat.
The ship combat, it's fine. It's serviceable.
This was going to be a question that I had for you, but yeah, there's rules for ship combat, and we have talked about this extensively. There's no good solution for it, but this is okay. It's crunchy. It sort of works. And yeah, there's a dizzying array of decisions you can make and things that you can add to your ship and stats and information. They do provide you with sort of like a example vessel, which is like, this is a good one. Your players could pick this, and I think that's nice. It's a
yes,
like a frigate that's pretty baseline. In character creation, you can kind of choose on a sliding scale. Would you like to be richer with a shittier ship or poorer with a better ship? Which I think is it's just a few different choices, but kind of a nice thing to pick. Like, are you an established trader with a decaying vessel, or are you like a new trader with a shiny new frigate? But yeah, you can spend as much or as little time and money on this as you want, and then yeah, like Matt said, spend a lot of money over the course of your rogue trader's career, adding increasingly ornate gothic baubles to the exterior of your ship to make it
right.
better.
You need an extra cathedral. Or what about I mean, if you
how about a spire that lets you travel through the warp even better? Yeah,
if you suggest putting a big statue of your characters that's half a kilometer high, your characters will love that. Overall, the like ship combat and crisis rules are built so that they can be fairly abstracted, right?
Yeah,
they do have enough detail so that like characters on the ship can each do a thing to help the ship. There's like a little more detail rules, like if you wanted to pull out and if you could somehow acquire some out of print Battle Fleet Gothic miniatures, which is a war game that Games Workshop made for 40K in space that is no longer in print, you could do so. But most of the way the like published modules are written is heavy abstraction to the ship combat, and that's probably the way I would continue to go and have gone with this.
There's another neat part about this, and I really like, that plays into the ship as a character thing, where you have to select or you have to roll for two different complications for your vessel. One is
everything is old and everything is broken and imperfect
and weird, and one of them is the machine spirit, the technological magic brain, whatever.
It's not AI, it's just a large language model.
That's right. That runs your ship. You pick an oddity, and these are things like it's, wrathful or rebellious. And, these small bonuses or penalties or just quirks. And then the other one is like your ancient vessel, like what's its past history? Was it built on, on Mars in an ancient past and has an, archaeotech component? Or like, was it wrested from a space Hulk and fashioned into what you've got? These are small things, but they give like character and personality to your ship. One nice thing, like Matt said, about similar to your individual characters, your ship will feel unique and weird and different. You're not going to have two that are exactly the same, even if they are the same like chassis, which is cool. That's like neat. There's a lot of like independence and uniqueness and distinct character to everything in a game like this.
Yeah, it really fits the 40K vibe of everything is so old that even the things that were mass produced are all unique at the end of the day, right? And just as you should always say the litany of barrel cleaning when you get ready to like fire your las gun, you should also say some litanies of praise to your ship's computer.
Yeah, so it's neat and also very, very fiddly and crunchy and complicated, but it does make it all feel very distinct and play into the vibe of 40K. It's a game with immaculate vibes, as always.
Yeah. And I mean, the ship also can, there's only a little paragraph here, but I think it's a good one and one that you will want to use, which is adventuring aboard your ship. Like, after you go on some adventures, like your ship picks up a weird thing from the warp, or there's some of your crew have started worshiping one of the characters as a god, and that's heresy. You're going to have to go down and deal with this cult that thinks that your rogue trader is the Emperor Reborn. Otherwise, you're going to get in trouble. These kind of fun things where like the ship itself is a place of mystery, exploration, and adventure. Because again, remember, it's a giant, like 3-kilometer long cathedral in space and is filled with all kinds of nooks and crannies and people you haven't met. Tens of thousands of them.
Should we talk about, we talked about the dice and resolution, but, playing the game, tests, and how you fight and things like that, the nuts and bolts of Rogue Trader.
Yeah. So like we said, it's a simple D percentile D100 system where you're rolling under your attribute plus bonus, skills are essentially bonuses to an attribute. You as the dungeon master are given a ton of detailed guidance on raising and lowering this difficulty, usually lowering it. It's a very punishing as written system. In combat, there's sort of a regular like action system where you have either a full or half action, and the combat's like very detailed. Like, do you want to take cover? Do you want to aim before you shoot? Like, all these things have consequences, right? Rob mentioned going full auto. There's exact rules for all of these things.
Yeah, and if you or your players love choices in combat, there's a chart of 20 different, combat actions you can take, which, this says advantages and disadvantages. But if you want to get really, really precise,
like that? Yeah. Then you'll love this.
How combat goes, you have all of the tools that you need.
One quirk of this being a percentile system based off of Warhammer 40K is everything in this game is a skill test, except the two things that, will come up fairly often in a game of far future violence, which is like shooting and hitting things, which are a special attribute, right? Weapon skill and ballistic skill, not skills. So it adds a further wrinkle. It sort of makes sense in that, like, you can't just, because skill increases are fairly cheap and there's no skill for weapon and ballistics skill. They're attributes.
I'm going to come out and say that I hate this. I understand why it is done this way. I don't like it. It irritates me from like a game perspective and like a just verisimilitude. There has to be a better way to do this. But yeah, you have attributes, not skills, that determine how good you are at either hitting things or shooting at them. It works. It feels very clunky to me.
Yeah, it's also like you're in a like mid-aughts role-playing game when there's detailed rules for exactly how much a character can lift or push or drag, or how far their standing high jump is versus long jump. Like, this is not a game that is really about that kind of stuff. To me, it's insane that we have these rules, and you can't just say as a dungeon master, you don't need a check or you should make a strength check. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy. It sucks because a lot of those detailed rules cut out some of the really, my favorite parts, which is the talking about the enemies and adventure locations you will meet in the Chronos Expanse, right? Which the game has done I think a decent job in the core manual to not only give you a sandbox to play in, but like a starting adventure to introduce you to said sandbox.
Yeah, and this is, I don't know how interesting or useful this is. I think depends on your familiarity with 40K, but there's a very detailed section on the Imperium, one on rogue traders themselves, one on the Coronis Expanse, and then, yeah, there's a starting adventure. I, being middlingly familiar with 40K, found it interesting and useful. If you're a lore expert, you're not going to care about any of this. I also found this doesn't matter. I don't even know why I'm bothering. It's out of print, but like I found that there's a lot of information that was repeated throughout this book, like many times, and also some that may or may not have been contradictory. I think this is because they were probably drawing from existing lore from other books or other source material and just sort of like plugging it in there. I don't know. This could have been edited a lot better. It's not awful. It's just like
we're told about like how rogue traders work like three times, right?
Yes.
In the rogue trader like character thing, in the intro to the book, in the like lore chapter. So and it kind of goes back on itself. So if we took all the information about rogue traders, reduced it to one chapter, we would like get a lot more detail or interesting things.
This could have used this reminds me, what were we talking about? One of the late 3.5 books. Like this is just like a very like mid-aughts type of book where I don't know, they didn't have editors or they just didn't bother with like trying to be concise. They just assumed that you nerds are going to read every word anyway. But this book could easily be like 100 pages shorter and not lose like even like a single piece of useful information. It's not unpleasant. It's not like awful. It's just, there was a lot of like wasted and repeated space or repeated words, wasted space.
Yeah. I will say, so for all of the like detailed rules about how much a character can lift and jump, I really enjoy the abstracted rules for like running profit, right? So you have a score called the profit factor. It has like basic like thresholds for like, do your characters have something they want for their starship? This is what they need to meet. It's abstracted and like you need to acquire this much wealth, power, and prestige, and these numbers represent this. It's also got like rules for doing things that like rogue traders are supposed to do, right? Acquiring a fleet, establishing imperial colonies, recovering imperial worlds that were lost, right? And kind of like some loose guides for that. I think, however, the details, the kind of gazetteer on the Chronos Expanse, I wish it was twice as long, but what we have is, I think, a great starting point for like, all right, here's a map of space. Where do you want to go? Who do you want to mess with, right? It's the right mix of, here's some established authorities. Here's the edge of those authorities. Here's the things beyond that edge, right?
Yeah, there's a ton of hooks and areas. There's maps and art. Like one of the great things about this book is that at every point there's what I consider to be really good adventure hooks, just something that I as a GM could easily work with. Lots of sort of like vaguely drawn in parts of the map with, here's a mysterious thing that happened here. Here's a horrible massacre that happened here. Here's a dead planet that, we don't know what exactly destroyed it. Here's an extinct Xenos civilization. Like, okay, this is the stuff I love. But yeah, all of these would make a terrific adventure. And that's, without getting into the actual like adversaries and factions and like deliberate hordes that you could go after. Like they've given you a ton of stuff to work with, and I agree with Matt, the Chronos Expanse itself, that part could be even longer, but it's there's a lot.
The starting adventure is also, it's not the most brilliant starting adventure. It's basically go find a thing that is valuable, and there's, oh no, another rogue trader interested in it. You'll run into some enemies along the way, have to like, recover this mysterious alien artifact while dealing with a psyker from an enemy following your trail. There's like a little space combat, a couple of planet explorations, some negotiation. While not brilliant, it's perfectly serviceable as a first adventure.
I liked it. It's pretty straightforward, but it does what like I think all starting adventures should do, is sort of like hit all the important parts of the game you're going to play. So there's a little negotiation, there's a little exploration, there's a little bit of haggling, there's a little bit of dealing with other rogue traders, other interested parties. You fight some orcs. You solve some puzzles. There's a pretty neat. I thought the sort of like the climax was neat. Your players are getting a fight with your rival's lieutenant on the ground while your rival attacks your ship in the sky. It's a very like cinematic, finale to a pretty standard find the hidden treasure adventure. The only thing I kind of wish that it had, to sort of like wrap up the whole this is 40K is like, I don't know, there's some like demons or warp or something, some chaos nonsense at the end to hit all the critical parts. But other than that, I think it's a pretty darn good starting adventure. I think you could add a few things, but it works pretty well as an introduction to the game and the setting.
Yeah, I think the provided materials are they're really, sufficiently weird, right? Here's a planet filled with these weird aliens. Here's a planet where everyone lives in giant crawling war machines that fight each other, right? Here's a planet where everyone lives in like 3-kilometer high Dwero Delph Moria. But they're all humans, right? By the way, it really gets the like, here's the fun, weird part of 40K that the miniature game does not get into. I will say, reflecting back on the lore of this game and the tone of this game, is I'm not sure that there's any reason to play this game unless everyone at your table is at least familiar with Warhammer 40K. At least they've played the game before, read a like novel, I don't know, played a computer game, just because otherwise, why not play a slightly better designed system?
Yeah, and I really enjoyed reading this. As somebody who probably will not play it. I like 40K. If somebody ran this and was like, do you want to be a player? I might say yes. I don't have enough friends who care enough about 40K to run this, but I enjoyed reading it.
I guess if you live in England, maybe you have.
Right.
Everyone fits this mark.
And probably a lot of you do. And I don't think it would be like a super hard sell for people who are vaguely familiar with it. But I did like, there's a lot I think that is a really good read. If you are interested in a lot of the stuff that Matt and I have talked about before, if you like a Firefly style game, or you like a ship, like even like a pirate campaign, like there's a lot of structural stuff here that I think you could borrow and like file certain elements off of. Like there's a lot of good ideas. I think this is one of the best, genuinely, in my opinion, one of the best versions of like that kind of campaign. Like you're a crew, you're doing missions trying to get richer. Like I think it's a really, really good, like mechanically and thematically, weirdly enough, right? Because you wouldn't think that 40K would work so well for this, but like it's just really well written. I think that, like you said, the profit system works really well. I think that the way that the sort of the crew works together, the ship is integrated. I think it's very easy to put together a campaign and like, here's all these different things you can do to get rich. And I think it works really well for that.
It works really well, especially like, I mean, my ideal running this would be like, all of my friends have played the Owlcat Rogue Trader game and they're excited to all do one together. Yeah. I would be like, that would be perfect. And I think the like tone like works best where it's like our family's monopoly on the rare Xenos fruit limoncello digestif liquor that we all enjoy so much, each sip of which costs the equivalent of a city.
Right.
We're running low on that. We need to acquire, some more and get into an insane decades long feud with another rogue trader family over the control of our barrels of like fancy space brandy or something like that. It really works well on the absurdity level.
That's exactly right. The absurd scale of 40K, I think, like makes this work really well because, like, you found the fruit of some like Xenos tree that's been extinct for 100,000 years.
It's called an apple. Wow, everything's grim in the future. No more apples.
Or like, an inscribed gold bar from some mad priest from 500 years ago, and it's worth more than a planet, and you can just like as many of these weird things you want to come up with, you can, and the scale of it makes it really easy to just come up with ideas, and your players cannot conceivably become rich enough to like really make a difference or really impact too much in the Imperium, which means they can kind of just go nuts with building a fleet if they want to, or buying planets, or becoming miniature warlords, or they can just stay small and keep one ship and just spend all that money on fancy statues of themselves to bolt
Right.
to the outside of their starship.
So this book is out of print. There are many supplements, including ones that will, okay, what if you want to be a space elf that's part of the crew or something like that? Oh yeah, there's supplements for that. And again, this came as part of a whole family of games. Dark Heresy, in which you play agents of an Inquisitor and assassins. Death Watch, in which you play Space Marines. Only War, in which you play a crack team of Imperial Guard human soldiers. But these are all out of print. You could probably find them if you look hard enough. But there is a new version of this game resurrected by Cubicle 7 Publishing, which has the 40K role-playing game license now called they have one called Wrath and Glory, which is a fast-paced, fast action adventure game where you can play everything from a space marine to, a tech priest or whatever. And then they've recently released a new one that uses the same percentile-based system called Imperium Maledictum.
Yeah, and Matt has had a lot more time with this than I have, but one way or another, one thing I can say with absolute certainty about Imperium Maledictum is that it is substantially better written, edited, and laid out than the Fantasy Flight 40K role-playing games. It is substantially easier to navigate. It does try to mash all of the settings and themes together into one book, which I think it suffers from, but there's no denying that it has benefited from modern, layout, editing, writing techniques. It is a lot less grueling to read through.
It is written in a way where I feel like converting from Dark Heresy or Rogue Trader to Imperium Maledictum is essentially you can do it in your head. It's the same characteristics. The skills are reduced down to like 20 skills that are a lot more straightforward. Some of the rough edges are filed off. Things are a little bit simpler, but not that much simpler. They're just better laid out. Rob is right in that I think it does suffer from the assumption is you're all agents of the Imperium. You all have different patrons. One of you might be working for a rogue trader, another for an Inquisitor, another for a sister of battle or something like that. But you're all kind of like more or less-ish regular people doing a dirty job that needs to be done. That's a fun idea for a campaign, but I think you could up the power level a little bit or just adjust the difficulties of everything down and use this system to run a rogue trader crew. No problem, right? But again, the assumption is like you're not a rogue trader. You're like a guy who works for a rogue trader.
Right.
You're not a navigator. You're a guy who works for a navigator. To me, that's much less fun. Like if I want to play 40K, I want to be a guy who, opens his third eye and sees through the warp and immaterium as a forest that I travel with care and I guide my ship. And then people pay me 10,000 space ducats for doing that once.
And this is what I think makes Rogue Trader work, and also like made Dark Heresy work, but like is that because they are mechanically messy, it is not the elegance of the system that gets people to play them. It's the vibes and the setting and the specific type of play. And because Imperium Maledictum is cleaner and a little bit better, but it's still kind of a crunchy mess because it is strongly based on those games. And people are playing it for that feel, and yeah, not actually being a rogue trader does take a lot of the enjoyment out of playing in the 40K setting, which is about just absurd, the immensity of scale and like, what you're doing on that, grand stage. But it's, well, one, you can't really get the old ones anymore, so there's that. But two, this is cleaner and better. And if you want to like get a better idea of like what the setting is or what the system is about and how it can be run, Imperium Maledictum is a lot more accessible, like substantially.
Yeah. The accessibility is a huge selling point. And again, if you want to make the characters all part of a rogue trader dynasty, I think you absolutely could and run this game. I think my like final gripe is that this was especially true when Rogue Trader first came out, but is still kind of true, is that like Games Workshop is a miniature game and they don't care about role-playing games anymore, even though that's how the company got its start. They will never release like a miniature set that's like, here's a bunch of you can use these to make characters for your role-playing game. If you want to do that, if you want like a tech priest and a navigator and like a rogue trader, you need to buy like 10 different miniature sets, which I guess is their plan all along. So it's annoying. I suppose if you wanted a like good miniature set for characters for a rogue trader dynasty, you'd either buy the Euclidean Star Striders set or the Inquisitorial Agent set. And I think between those two, you could probably build what you might want for a rogue trader crew. So, or I would say the Blackstone Fortress set these days would give you also a rogue trader crew. Like there's a little tech priest guy and a rogue trader guy and a navigator guy or gal. So
this is very helpful, Matt. One of the theoretical draws, is that, there's a lot of great...
there's a lot of miniatures out there.
A lot of miniatures. However, I would and do become quite incensed when I have to buy too many miniatures, just to get the ones that I want, which is exactly what Games Workshop does, so I don't buy any. But if you are even like the teensiest bit interested in that, then this is obviously like a very cool game to play, and all your players will get to have really cool minifigs to represent them.
Yeah. Okay, Rob. Well, so that's a trip down memory lane with RIP Fantasy Flight Games Rogue Trader role-playing game. If you have questions about this series, if you want to hear us do a deep dive into Wrath and Glory or Only War or Dark Heresy or something like that, or if you want to, let us know about how your Rogue Trader dynasty ran out of the finest Exodite Eldar tobacco for their cigars, and so they decided to take over an entire sector of space to replenish them. Send us an email, dmofnone@gmail.com.
Let us know. We always love talking about 40K. It is never not fun. I hope that this was interesting. This was big for a while. They made a video game out of it. Sorry that it is no longer in print. But
play the video game. It's fun. Play the video game. I think it has now been long enough that most of the bugs have been worked out.
This is also my thing about Owlcat games is give it a little time and they'll release some patches and then it won't crash on you quite so often. But thanks for listening, everybody. If you want even more Dungeon Master of None, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Dungeon Master of None. You can join us on the Discord, link in the show notes.
If you can't do either of those things, we'd really appreciate it if you leave us a rating and review to help other people find the show.
And whatever you do, keep rolling them dice.